Man, oh man, after 4 years of full-time travel, you would think we wouldn't make any more mistakes.
We have made a lot of mistakes, and we don't admit it very often, but we want to travel.
Because we're perfect.
Because we are perfect.
Yes, we're perfect.
Absolutely, everybody knows that.
No.
But there have been some mistakes and some great stories that we want to share with you today. By the way, my name is Steve, and this is Chris. We're EatWalkLearn. And this video is really all about some of the mistakes that we've made and maybe some tips for you so you can avoid the same mistakes that we've made.
And this may be a mistake too. Anybody else out there? Do you
you're making a sock.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a hat.
Oh, a hat.
Yes, a hat. And I'm going to leave my hats all over my next repositioning cruise. For people who need a hat, there's just going to be a hat randomly laying there for you.
I don't think you can leave hats around for people to wear.
It may be a mistake, but at least it's something for me to do, and I enjoy crocheting. So if you're a crocheter, let me know if you're a crocheter down below. Anyway, Mistake number one. I did this mistake, and see, but this was the scenario. And he says to me, you booked the flights. I'm like, okay, so we had to get from Turkey to Dublin.
To Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah, to Dublin, Ireland. And so I'm good. I'm on Google Flights. I'm figuring out the flights, and the first crack at it was $400 each for us to get from Fethiye, Turkey to Dublin. I'm like, we're not paying $400 for flights. So I started Googling. I'm like, I go to Google Flights, and I see all that. I start figuring out that okay, if we get to Istanbul, and then we can go to London, and then we can go to Dublin. It's going to be 3 flights. It's going to be a long day. But if we break it up and do it one leg at a time, each leg's only going to be like $39, $49, $59, these low fares. Thought, all right, boom, I'm going to book it. So I booked the first flight from Fethiye, right outside of Fethiye to Istanbul. Great. And then Istanbul to London. Great. And then London to Dublin. Great. And then I go into our little system, and I'm putting it all up in our system, which we'll explain our system in just a minute. And I'm like,
what happened, dear?
And Steve sees my look, and he's like, she screwed up. What I had done on the Istanbul part, there are 2 airports in Istanbul. One's on the Asian side and one's on the Europe side. I was flying into the Asian side and leaving out of the Europe side with only 2 hours in between the flights.
Yeah, and they're like an hour and a half apart, even with no traffic.
Yeah. So and of course they're non-refundable flights. And so what we ended up doing, we ended up having to eat the first flight, but the first flight was only $39 or something. Yeah. So the good news is I booked it the day before. So then that got us into Istanbul, and then we could enjoy a night in Istanbul, and then we didn't have a 3-legged flight or 3-legged day the next day. So it ended up working out great and was a better plan anyway, but we ended up having to eat 2 flights, or one flight each.
We had enough flexibility in our schedule that we could get into Istanbul the day before. And also, I had a great time because Istanbul is a fun place to spend a day if you want to kill a day. So it's a great place to do that. Yeah. So, and we got to see both airports.
Yeah. And we got to eat some Turkish delight. So that was kind of fun. And that's another whole story about how we got our Turkish delight.
Yeah. So cities that have 2 airports.
Yeah. So Istanbul, Milan, London has 4 or 5 airports. Of course, New York City and Chicago. We know a lot of the American airports cities have multiple airports. But the problem that you get into is like when you go buy a ticket, you can say Istanbul, and then like all Istanbul, and then it will you get put in one airport, and then you just assume that IST for the Istanbul airport means everywhere, but it means one airport, but it can pull up the other airports too. So that's how that happened. But we're going to share 3 more tips about how we've screwed up. And then we're going to share tips about how to not screw up. So stay tuned as we're going through all these errors and how Chris and Steve, full-time travelers who left Denver in May of 2021, still continue to make mistakes.
So the next one it's actually hasn't happened to us, but it's almost happened many times. This is a story that was relayed to us from a friend of ours that got their dates mixed up. And by what I mean by that, it's really easy to do that because in the United States, if you wanted to say April 3rd, it's 4/3, right? 4/3/2024 or 2025. Anyways,
you put the month and then the date.
The month and the date. Yeah. But in a lot of places in the world, it's the other way around. And when you book something or you write in or you type in the dates, if you type in 4/3, that's March 4th.
Right.
And we had a friend of ours that booked some flights well in advance in this exact situation, and showed up on April 3rd for their flight and said, I'm here, I'm ready to check in. And they said, ma'am, you're a month late for your flight. And then, what do? You can't say, oops, I made, you got to eat it. And if you want to travel, now you're booking a flight at a moment's notice, if there's even space on the plane,
probably very
paying
expensive.
a lot more for it. So really be aware of the date switch, the day and the date when you're traveling, especially in Europe and Asia, really almost everywhere.
So a tip to that is if the weather is in Celsius, the date's probably switched. So I think the U.S. is the only place that does Fahrenheit and month date. Everybody else does date month.
Yeah, and hopefully there's some dates that you can't really screw up like that. Like my birthday is April 29th.
And mine's December 30th, so
right.
you can't screw them up. But
you can't.
Yeah,
right.
But to the same thing, so in relation to dates, it's also about time. So, in the U.S. we don't use military time a lot, but the rest of the world does. I always screw up 1400 and 4 o'clock. In my mind, 1400 is 4 o'clock, but 1400 is actually 2 o'clock. And whenever I see 1400, somehow the one just drops off and I get in my head that's 4 o'clock. How many times have we missed tours that started at 2, we showed up at 4?
It's happened a couple of times when we showed up a couple hours late for, for a tour or something like that, and have had to eat it because it's like, sorry, you showed up 2 hours late. So military time is it's confusing. I look at numbers really fast too, and it's like, 6 o'clock, and it's like, no, that says 1600. Right. That's not 6 o'clock. That's 4 o'clock.
Right.
So military time. That's So
the next one. Now, this has not happened to us, and the reason why it has not happened to us, we'll tell you about in the tips. But this is miscounting the amount of days you can use for your visa. This happens a lot for people with their Schengen days. So a lot of people can only be in basically the EU, the European district, also known as a Schengen area, which is the name of the visa that people have to have, which Americans don't actually have to have the visa right now, but they are going to have soon.
It comes soon.
But anyway, you can only have 90 days over 180 days. And so if you're in and out of the Schengen district, or you're there for 90 days, or you're thinking it's 3 months, and 3 months ends up being 92 days because you're in big, long months or something, you could really get in a lot of trouble for overstaying your visa. This is a big deal.
Yeah, and two things. One is, if you're coming in and out of this Schengen area, it's even more complicated and even harder to calculate it, because the rule is a rolling 90 days in a 180-day period. So it's not like you can just keep going 30 days in and 30 days out. You've got to make sure that you're fitting within that 180 days, that 90 days. So it can become very complicated. And you say, well, what's the big deal if you're 1 or 2 days over? Well, it's up to that agent. I don't think they put you in jail.
You in jail? Well, they might. Depends on the country. Depends on the country.
To me, the worst thing that could happen is they'd say, you're not allowed back in the Schengen zone anymore. You're banned from Europe.
Right.
That kind of thing. So, and it's kind of up to the agent. We've heard different stories. The immigration person on the exit.
Yeah, but okay, I want to address that. So first of all, people will say, well, they're not stamping my passport, so they're not keeping track. They are tracking you through your boarding passes and the microchip inside your passport. So just because you didn't get stamped doesn't mean you weren't tracked. Also, people ask this question in relation to cruises. So maybe you're leaving the U.S., you're on a reposition cruise, your first stop is the Azores, which is Portugal, which starts your Schengen days. You come into Barcelona, you're in and out, Greece, whatever, and then you leave. Well, the minute you were in the Schengen waters is the beginning of your Schengen time. Now, a lot of people say, this is true, this is not true, whatever. We've actually read the rule. This is our interpretation of it. So we very conservatively always make sure when we're on a cruise, we're counting the first day in Schengen waters and the last day in Schengen waters as our Schengen time, even if we're not physically on an island or in the country, or even if we didn't even get off the boat, we still count that day.
I think the point is that we're conservative about that. Mm-hmm. We're not going to get to like 89 and a half days and leaving it up to interpretation of whether, we've been in Schengen days for more than 90 or not. Let's just play it safe, and let's just not mess with visas. Any visa situation in any country, you just don't want to overstay.
Right, and I don't want to have to prove to an immigration agent that I was here or not here. Having to prove something, you're not going to win. It's like people you don't want to argue with, the flight attendant and an immigration officer. Don't argue with them. But to this point, though, if your visa is 30 days or 90 days or 60 days or whatever, don't leave it to the day before to leave the country. What if your flight gets canceled or you get delayed or you get lost or whatever? Yeah. Leave yourself a couple of days. Don't stress yourself out. Don't take the whole 90 days. Leave it 87. So you got a couple days left just in case something happens.
So we have one more mistake, and then we'll throw in a whole bunch of tips in addition to what we've already said.
Yeah.
So to help you avoid these. And this is an embarrassing situation, and the idea is we're really good at this.
Yeah.
About having enough cash.
We're too good. We're too good at this.
We are really good at not only when we land, let's say we land in an airport in a particular country.
So wait, what's the problem? Always have cash.
Not having cash.
Yeah, always have cash. Yeah.
Getting cash at the ATM before you even leave the airport, and having an ATM card that has no ATM transaction fees. That way you know that you're not paying exorbitant fees. We've had some of those as well. But leaving a country, we're really good at, we're leaving the country in an hour, or we're at the airport or whatever, we're at the bus station. Let's make sure we spend all the rest of our cash so we're not leaving the country with a whole bunch of cash in our hand, because that's bad too, because when is the next time you're going to go to that country to use it? So what happened in El Calafate?
Oh, this is so embarrassing. So we were leaving on the bus the next morning at 8 a.m. Okay, and we're out to dinner with our friends across the street from the bus station, and they say to us, "Oh, you have to actually check in for the bus." We're like, "Oh, okay." And I said, "I wonder if we can go over to the bus station tonight and check in for tomorrow, so we don't have to deal with the crowd or whatever in the morning."
Yeah, we already had our bus tickets.
We had our bus tickets and everything, but there was an immigration issue that you had to go through because we were crossing borders.
Right.
So we're like, okay. So we finish at dinner, and we're like, okay. All we're going to do in the morning is walk from the hotel to the bus, get on the bus, cross the border, and we're going to be gone. I mean, we have like a couple hours on the bus.
What do you need cash for?
We don't need any cash. We're done. So at the restaurant, they had a tip jar, and so a big tip jar on the counter. And so I had some extra, 3,000 or 4,000 pesos or whatever it was, and I thought this is a great way to get rid of the last of our money. I put it in the tip jar because we'd actually had sat at their dinner table for a couple hours and felt that it was appropriate to leave a nice tip. So we put all the money in the tip jar. We leave. We go across the street to the bus station to go check in for the next day. And the guy says, "Oh, no, you can't check in. You have to come tomorrow." I was like, "Okay." He says, "Oh, and it's a 3,000 peso exit charge." And I'm like, no, I only have 2,000. What?
There's a tax, a special
there's some sort of exit
tax to leave the country.
So we don't have,
and it's cash only.
It's cash only.
Card.
And there's no ATM machine there. We don't want to go withdraw. It was 3,000 pesos. We don't want to draw the minimum of 20,000 or to have 3,000. And then there's not an ATM anyway. It's just this mess.
We scrounged up 2,000 by the equivalent. Is about $3.
Yeah.
But we had about $2 in change, whatever.
In the bottom of my backpack, I found some change. In the pocket, he found 1,000. Anyway, so we only have 2,000 and we need 3,000. I'm like, what am I going to do? So we actually walked back over to the restaurant, and in my best Spanish, I said, "I am so sorry. This is what's happening. We need 3,000 to leave. I only have 2,000. I can't leave tomorrow unless I have another 1,000. And I put 3,000 in your tip bucket. Could I take 1,000 out?" Which is only worth 75 cents or $1.
Not even $1.
And they just laughed and laughed and laughed. They thought it was the funniest thing. And I am horrified that I have to do this because this is the only way we can get. And it was rainy and it was windy.
Cold
and the local ATM was probably a 2-mile walk away if we could even come up with that. It was like, and they were just laughing incredibly at us. First of all, that we left a 3,000 peso tip because they weren't even expecting that because we'd already tipped already on the table, and they were just like, "Take as much as you need." Anyway,
They're very gracious.
They're very gracious.
And we were very humble and embarrassed to be reaching into their tip jar so that we could pay our taxes so that we could get out of the country.
Yeah. So anyway, don't do that. And then and actually we're in Chile. I don't know if you guys heard about the big power outage all over the country of Chile this week. Everything was out. All the electricity, the ATMs, all the cell phones, the internet,
traffic lights.
Nothing worked. And a friend of ours was trying to get to the airport in Santiago, and he didn't have any cash. He was going to use his credit card in order to pay for the cab or the bus or whatever he was going to take to get to the airport. And of course, the credit cards didn't work, and he couldn't get any cash. And so, actually, a really local, or he was in Chile, a really nice guy in Chile actually paid for his bus fare with the cash that he had to get him to the airport. So, anyway. Don't wait till the last second to have the last penny to leave the city. So anyway, that's our story.
Yeah,
all right.
So a lot of, we're still here, so we've made mistakes, but we're keep fighting and keep traveling and keep experiencing those amazing adventures. And one of the things that we do is to help us keep these things straight and not make these kinds of mistakes, is that we have a spreadsheet of all of our travel activities, and it's kind of like our sandbox of how we play around with dates and things that we're going to do. So it's a great way to check to make sure that we haven't double booked something, that we're going in and out of the right place, because we're keeping notes in this spreadsheet. And that's one of the tips.
Well, I think you're kind of underplaying this system. So the system is 3 parts. It's a spreadsheet, it's a Google Calendar, and it's email. And so on the spreadsheet that Steve and I both share, it's Google Sheets. On that spreadsheet, we put everything, our entire 4 years is on there. Every place we've been and all the places that we're going. Everything in the past is true and actual and done. Everything in the future may or may not be exactly what we're going to do. Either it's roughly an idea, or it's something we want to book, or it's immediate future and it's finalized, but it's not 100%. It may not be 100%. What's in the calendar that Steve and I share, we have a Google Calendar. In there are the actuals. So every time we book something and we have a confirmation number, it goes into the calendar. And we have certain places on the calendar that we put things. Every day at 3:00 is what our hotel is for that night. And all the confirmation numbers and everything. Even if the hotel or the Airbnb is for a month, the confirmation number is on every single day. And all the details are on every single day. The address is on every single day. So we don't have to go back to the original day or the end day to find that information. Right. When we're mid-stay. Right. We can actually find it mid-stay. Because how many times do you need an address in the month that you're someplace? It seems like almost every day I need the address for something.
Right.
And then the third part of the system is we share a booking account, so we know a booking.com account, so that all the emails always come to me. Steve can always go in and look at all the messages and all the reservations within booking. We each have an Airbnb account because it used to be Airbnb only allowed 6 cancellations a year per account. That's why we have 2, but in general we use 1 now because Airbnb doesn't have that policy anymore. But within the emails, as the confirmation emails come into us, we then verify that the confirmation email also matches the calendar and matches the spreadsheet. So the 3 tools work together to keep us accurate.
Yeah, and the key is we're sharing this so we can both look at it. So one person doesn't, because we've had a couple of times where one person has, booked a hotel room and then the other person goes to book it and we realize, oh, there's something that's already on the calendar. I don't want to do this. So it's avoided a lot of mistakes and a lot of things like double bookings because we're sharing this information and we're not doing it in a silo.
And probably the final tip we want to share in order to eliminate double bookings and misbookings and wrong dates and so on is do 1 trip at a time. So some people might say, well, you're on 1 trip. Like our whole life is 1 trip. It's not. We break it down. When we're in Turkey, we only work on Turkey. When we're in London, we only work on London. Do 1 set of logistics at a time before you start working on another. And we may work on something in October and then come back and work on something in May. When it's January, you may work on October, then you might come back in May, but we're only working on that thing at one time. Because otherwise, it just gets messy.
Yeah, stay focused. my friends.
Stay focused, my friends. All right. Speaking of staying focused, thank you for staying focused and staying with us. We love that you're here with us. Please remember to subscribe. We've got a bunch of series coming up, including, coming up soon, a whole series on expenses. Our annual numbers are coming up. Stay tuned for that. Go ahead and hit that alert button if you really want to know how much we spend and where we spend it. That series is coming up. Talk to you soon.